So, you've probably heard a lot of talk about this tech battle brewing across the Atlantic. But what if the biggest move wasn't some big, flashy headline? What if it was something quieter, a hidden mechanism being built deep inside EU law? Let's get into it.
So here's the big question on everyone's mind. Are US cloud giants like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google actually getting kicked out of EU government services? Well, the answer isn't a straight yes or no. It's a little more complicated than that.
See, you won't find one big law that just says US cloud providers out. Nope. The EU is doing something way more clever. It's building this hidden mechanism, piece by piece, that all leads to the same place. And to really get how it works, we first have to understand why they're even doing this.
And that why? Well, it all starts with this massive and, frankly, completely unsolvable legal conflict between the EU and the US. And this isn't just some small disagreement, okay? This is the very engine driving this whole strategy.
Okay, so on one side of the ring, you've got the EU's top court. Back in 2020, this thing called the Schrems II ruling came down, and it didn't just rip up the old data transfer deal. It did something much bigger. It put this new, heavy burden on any European company to prove, and I mean prove, that any data they send overseas is just as safe as it is at home. You can imagine this created a massive legal headache. Then, on the other side of the pond, you have the US Cloud Act. And this law is crystal clear. It says if you're a US company, US law enforcement can demand any data you control. And here's the kicker. It doesn't matter one bit if that data is sitting on a server in Frankfurt or Dublin. The law follows the company, not the data. And right there, you see the impossible situation, the legal catch-22. If you're a US cloud company in Europe, what do? If you follow a US warrant, you're breaking EU's GDPR. If you follow GDPR and refuse the warrant, you're breaking US law. There's literally no way to win. You can't obey both. It's a total legal checkmate. So when European policymakers looked at this mess, they came to a pretty stark conclusion, which this quote just nails. They realized, hey, if we can't fix this with another treaty or some fancy contract, we have to fix it a different way. The only real watertight solution? To be completely outside of US jurisdiction. All right, so how is the EU actually gonna pull this off? Well, not with some big, clumsy law. Instead, they're using a really clever two-track strategy. Let's break down how they're building it. Okay, so there are two parts to this plan. Track one is kind of the soft approach. It's all about using government money and purchasing power. Track two, though, that's the hard approach. That's the hidden legal machine we're here to figure out. And both of these tracks are running at the same time, pointed at the very same target. This first track is basically classic industrial policy. The EU gets that its local cloud companies, the OVHs and T-Systems of the world, can't really go toe-to-toe with the US giants on scale. So what do? They create a kind of protected market by making the public sector a huge anchor client that prefers to buy from sovereign providers. They give these EU companies the breathing room they need to grow. But honestly, this is just the warm-up act. Yeah, because the real power, the real genius of this whole thing is in track two. This is where we find that hidden mandate. And remember, it's not a single law. It's a brilliant three-part chain reaction. You have to see how these pieces fit together. Okay, step one. The first link in this chain is the new Data Act. And it does two really important things. First, you can think of it as a pathfinder. It gets rid of those crazy expensive switching fees, which makes it way easier for a government agency to actually leave their current US cloud provider. But second, and this is the big one, it acts as a shield. It takes the EU's ideas about data protection and extends them beyond just your personal data to cover all sensitive government and industrial data. All right, step two, the NIS2 directive. Now this is the engine that makes the whole thing go. It officially labels public administrations as essential entities. And here is the absolute smoking gun. It gives member states the power to require these entities to use certified cloud services. You see what just happened? That one little sentence turns a nice-to-have certification into a must-have requirement. It's no longer voluntary. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. Step three, the EUCS certification. This is the weapon. It's a new single cybersecurity standard for the whole EU. And what's so special about it? Well, its highest tier, the High Plus level, is going to have a sovereignty requirement. And what does that mean? It means to get that top-level certification, a provider has to prove it's legally immune to foreign laws. In other words, they have to be immune to the U.S. Cloud Act.
So let's put all three pieces together and see the whole machine. You've got the Data Act acting as the shield, setting the legal groundwork for demanding immunity. Then you've got the NIS2 directive as the engine, forcing public services to actually use a certified provider. And finally, you have the EUCS certification as the weapon, which defines that top-tier certification as immunity from the Cloud Act. Shield, engine, weapon. It's this perfect, inescapable chain reaction.
When you put all that together, the result isn't just some theory anymore. What you get is a powerful and pretty much unavoidable de facto hosting mandate. I mean, just put yourself in the shoes of a national cybersecurity regulator for a second. You're responsible for your country's most critical infrastructure. NIST tells you that you have to use a certified service. Are you going to pick the good enough certification, or are you going to pick the one that guarantees total legal immunity from foreign governments? Come on, it's not even a choice, is it? They're basically forced to demand that top tier. And this chart just lays out this simple, stark reality of it all. If the highest level of certification requires being immune to the Cloud Act, then US-based providers simply can't comply. It's impossible for them. But EU-based providers? They can. It's a simple pass-fail test, and the test has been designed so that only one team can ever pass.
So I know this all sounds like some super complex legal and technical stuff happening way over in Brussels, but the impact of this, it's going to be felt by everyone, and it's going to affect services that you might actually use every single day.
So what does this mean in the real world? Well, it means that huge new projects, like the big pan-European digital identity wallet that's coming, are almost guaranteed to be built exclusively on EU cloud providers. And that, in turn, puts a ton of pressure on existing national services, like Digi in the Netherlands, to move over too, so everything works together. What's the bottom line? Non-EU cloud companies are effectively being locked out of the most sensitive, most critical parts of the European public market. This isn't just about a technical standard anymore. It's a huge, huge step towards what the EU is calling digital sovereignty.
And all of this leaves us with one last really big question. Are we watching the dawn of a truly sovereign, secure European digital future, one that protects its citizens' data? Or is this the beginning of a fractured internet, a splinternet, with digital walls going up between competing powers? That's the big question, and the answer, well, it's still being written.